This is Duke University.
All black, everything, everything black, culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back, black.
Welcome to Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're joined in this special episode of Left of Black by Jawole Willa Jo Zollar.
Yes.
She is the artistic director and founder of the Urban Bushwoman. We are here at the Reynolds Theater at Duke University, where the Urban Bushwomen are in a 2-week residency before they open the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I have to say that we left snow in New York
to find ice in North Carolina.
So it's been unexpected. It's been really wonderful to have the time to be in the theater this long. Yeah. It's just a real gift.
It's been 30 years. Talk a little bit about, because I think there are very few places in the black artistic world, at least, and some aspects, obviously, of the general mainstream dance world. Folks know who the Urban Bushwomen are, and it's been 30 years. I mean, what has it been like trying to do this? And I'm really thinking about what the conditions might have been in 1984. When you start the group. And folks trying to figure out what it is and being able to sustain it for so many years.
Well, when I think of 30 years, it's kind of mind-blowing to me, right, because it doesn't seem like it's been that long. In 1984, the interesting thing about that period of time, I would say probably from 1982 to 86, there were a lot of people who formed companies. I think there was a real kind of surge of dance companies forming.
Right. Pushing back from the more traditional companies that...
Yeah,
right.
And I think when I formed Urban Bushwomen, people were surprised by the name. Because at that time, you named the company with your name. Yeah. And so, I knew I didn't want to do that. Right. When I found the name for the company, I was with a friend of mine, we were listening to jazz, and we were doing this brainstorming of names, and most of them really bad. And I picked up an album by the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and I said, Urban Bushmen, we're Urban Bushwomen. And I knew them, I knew some of them, so we talked to them, said, can I use this name? Yeah. But it also took me back to Gary Bartz and Harlem Bush music, and just that whole idea of, I grew up in Kansas City, in what people call the inner city, and so that idea that, for me, of connecting to it, the bush, that it's thick, it's dense, it's powerful, it's creative.
It's urban.
Yeah, and and it could, there's some danger. So all of that, for me, was what made me want to have something that conjured an image for people and not just my name.
What else went into that decision not to use your name? I mean, in most descriptions, some good, some bad, of Urban Bushwomen, they get described as kind of a black feminist dance troupe. How much of that choice was really about keeping the focus on the lives and experiences of black women and taking it away from you specifically being the artistic director of the troupe?
I think I was influenced by groups like Sweet Honey and the Rock. There was a group called Wildflower Order, and I've also been influenced by ensemble theater, open theater, provisional theater,
Black arts theater.
Black, right. Absolutely, right. New Lafayette. So the idea of having something that is, and also by SNCC, I was talking about that earlier, this shared leadership, or this things not based on this one central figure. Right. Yeah, although I am the visionary, I am the person who leads it and who has been the continuity. The vision for me was to bring together a group of people who were inspired by the methodology and the process and committed to learning and growing and collaborating together. Yeah. I did not want a collective. Right. Collectives are really hard and often don't work. And it's usually a few people doing the work, and it's called a collective. So I did want something that had an intentional leadership to it. But I really wanted something that was larger than my name or me as the personality.
What have been some of the biggest surprises of maintaining this vision for 30 years?
That we have maintained it. You couldn't have told me 30. Honestly, when I formed the company, the tape that I had in my mind was, okay, I'll work for 10 years and then maybe someone will notice us. And then, you know, so in some ways we were shot out of a cannon. Yeah. There's a lot of good with that, and there's a lot of, you know, not so good with that, because the expectations were high so early when I felt like I was just still forming and developing. But I think I've been surprised by, I mean, I know it, but I'm always surprised by when people talk about what the work means. I'll get random letters from people and just saying what seeing the work over the years has meant to them in terms of giving them courage, giving them inspiration. And I wasn't thinking from that point of view that that's what would happen. But somewhere in there, that is certainly what I wanted. Yeah.
You're watching Left of Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here today with Jawole Willa Jo Zollar, who is the artistic director and the founder of the Urban Bush Women, who are performing here at Duke University, here in the Reynolds Theater. Talk a little bit about your influences. I know you did a piece a few years ago, Walking with Pearl. So Pearl Promise obviously is an important inspiration for you, but who else have been some of your inspirations?
Wow, I'll try to be brief.
That's fine.
You know, I'm a child of really a lot of movements. The Black arts movement being one that was central to my philosophical framing of how I would think about art. And I've been thinking about that a lot since the funeral of Amiri Baraka. When I read Blues People, it was, you know, as a college student, it was like, oh, I can be me. Yeah. I can be me. When I listened to Hakeem Madhubuty's poems, Donnell Lee then, and you know, him so cool, super cool, him don't even stop for red lights. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I can be me, and I can create from that place. So that's why the name that's what drew me to that idea of Urban Bush Women. I can create from who I am and the strength and the vulnerabilities of my community. So I think movements have certainly influenced me. SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the idea that shared leadership and purpose and training and education connected to a community of people is powerful.
Well, I think about what Ella Baker brought to that movement, the idea that you don't create leaders, you create leadership, right? You complete a context for folks to grow leadership out of their own ranks instead of bringing folks in from the outside.
And that is absolutely the philosophy of our Summer Leadership Institute and our work in community. That is what we do, and it is also grounded in how we analyze race, that we have to have a structural analysis of racism. Otherwise, we keep getting things thrown at us and we don't understand how to respond or what's happening, and it'll throw us off. But when you understand it and you see what's happening, then you understand how to keep your vision moving forward and understand the stuff that's impacting that.
A few months back, we had the chance to talk with Camille A. Brown, when she was also in residence down here at Duke, and I know she did some choreography for you a few years ago. How important has Urban Bush Women been as a vehicle for younger choreographers who might not get opportunities working with other dance troupes?
I think it's an important vehicle, and I would say in particular Black female choreographers. I think that there is a need to bring more attention to the Black female experimenters who are really working on being influenced by Fred Moten, the radical Black side of the aesthetic. So if they're experimenting as Black women from these places, sometimes the larger society doesn't even know what they're abstracting from. So I really want to lift up those voices, and that's part of our work. We have something called Project Next Generation, which is looking at how we support, in particular, Black female choreographers and female choreographers of color. But I would really say choreographers who are marginalized in some way, either by the gender identity or subject matter, that I feel like Urban Bush Women can support.
Do you get an opportunity to interact with younger folks? And I'm thinking small children in this case. You know, I think there's so many images that they're dealing with, and you know, they know who Beyonce is, and they see her movements. They see a Miley Cyrus, and they see her movements, right? But they don't necessarily know about a larger Black tradition of bodies moving. So how important it is to connect with those younger audiences?
Absolutely, and I have a great story about that. Two of the members of the company, Tendai Kumba and Shannon Judson, who will be performing here, they were brought as young children, as young women, to see Urban Bush Women by Tendai's mother, Bahati Kumba, who teaches at Spelman. Said, I want you to see a vision of Black womanhood on stage that is, you know, what I want you to aspire to. They are in the company. When they told me that story, and I didn't know it until,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, that for me is like, when funders ask what success is, that is success. So it is absolutely important to connect to younger women to understand that sensuality, intellect, the physical, the emotional are all part of a holistic development, and none of those has to be objectified or separated out, but they're part of who we are. So we don't have to deny any of that.
We're here with Jawole Willa Jo Zollar. She is the artistic director of the Urban Bush Women and also the founder. The program that you're going to be presenting here at Duke, one deals with the idea of the Black migration. Talk a little bit about your inspiration for that and your own Kansas City roots in that.
Yeah. I did a keynote speech actually this started at the Summer Leadership Institute when someone asked me, how were the core values of Urban Bush Women connected to my background? And I really had to think about that. And I was like, okay. So I just started spontaneously talking about my family's history. That became turned into a keynote presentation. I did that keynote in Kansas City for the sunsetting of Link. And one of the former members of the company, Grisha Coleman, came up to me and said, that's a piece. And we had been doing all this family research. So I wanted to connect my family's migration from the South, particularly Texas, and Alabama and South Carolina, as we're finding, to the Midwest and Kansas City, and to jazz. Yeah. My mother was a jazz singer and dancer and musician, pianist, and all of the things that were bubbling up around the 30s, 40s, 50s, and my family's history, and the racism that my family came into contact with directly, particularly my father when he wanted to, when he started selling houses to Black families in white neighborhoods. And I wanted to tell that story. I wanted to tell it in a way that celebrated the environment of the time, which was the jazz clubs. I grew up in clubs. My father owned a tavern, Allen Budd's in Kansas City. I grew up in the tavern. I grew up around jazz, and so I wanted to tell it. And also I was a performer in what were called revues. So my sister and I were the kiddie act, but there was usually a comic MC, an exotic or dancer. So I grew up doing that. So the structure of the piece is that.
You mentioned jazz. One of your other pieces is a kind of a reflection on the work of John Coltrane.
Yes.
How do you explain 40 years after his death? And you know, it wasn't the most accessible music, particularly later in his career. How do you explain, you know, the fact that he resonates continuously as such a powerful ideal of integrity and artistry, you know, so many years afterwards?
Genius. I think the music, I went to the High Point Museum, I think it was last year, and they had an exhibit on John Coltrane as part of my research. And I think the connection to spirituality, and I was actually, after Amiri Baraka's death, I was playing Rahsaan Roland Kirk, and I was talking about Coltrane. I said, this was the sound of the Black Arts Movement. It was deeply connected to spirituality. I think the music carries the history. You hear the field hollers, you hear the aspirations, you hear the blues, you hear the urgency. All of that is in the music, and that's what continues to make it present. We're working with George Caldwell, who's an incredible pianist, and George is making new music inspired by that reflection of Coltrane.
Are you listening to any new music these days?
Yeah, I have the young ones. I say, okay, who should I be listening to?
I mean, because you are traveling with young dancers, and you have some of that has to bleed into your ears at some point.
Yeah, and it's exciting to me because I'll ask them, like, who. So I was watching the Grammys, and I didn't know Pharrell Williams, so I was like, okay, he's interesting. I want to know more. So I try to just be open. I think that I hear a lot of my generation complaining about like, oh, they don't know music. I was like, no, we need to listen. We need to be open, because the same thing was said about us. And then I think we can help them understand the roots and the connection and the legacy and the continuity. So,
and how to sustain what they're doing. I mean, ultimately, that's, it has to be something that can be timeless, that can live for a long time.
I was late coming to hip hop. I was living in the Bronx, and it was outside my window, and it was loud, and I complained, and I just, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, because they had these huge sound systems, and I didn't get it at the time, so I was just so angry about the music because I was trying to sleep. I got the dance immediately, so I was late really coming into understanding the power of what the whole movement was about, and so I'm still learning, and I'm still connecting, but I connected immediately to the dance. I mean, as soon as I saw the dance that was coming out of that movement, I knew these. I said, they are on to something. They are on to something that is so powerful and so multi. It's not like, I'm the funk generation. We kind of had it maybe in one place in our body. They are multi
everything.
sensory and reflective of all of the ways that information are coming in. You see that in what they're doing. It's really powerful.
We've been wonderfully joined today by Jawole Willa Jo Zollar, the artistic director and founder of the Urban Bushwomen. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. This is great.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black. All black, all black.